Welcome to the Real View podcast, where Ohio Realtors connect you to innovators and influencers, keeping you with the real view of real estate. Whether you're a broker, agent, first-time homebuyer, industry leader, or just happen to stumble upon our podcast today, you can expect to hear tips, tools, tricks, interesting information, and so much more from the experts in Ohio's real estate game.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Real View Ohio Policy Talk. I'm your host, Anastasia, and we have a very special guest with us today from the Ohio Housing Finance Agency, Executive Director Bill Beagle. Director Beagle was appointed to lead OHFA in January, just a few months ago, and he brings years of experience in public service, economic development, and housing policy. He's a former state senator and now helps lead the charge to make homeownership more accessible and affordable for Ohioans. Dr. Beagle, welcome to the show. We are thrilled to have you.
Well, good morning, Ashley. It's nice to be here.
And I'm also joined today by Andrew Huffman, Assistant Vice President of Government Affairs here at Ohio Realtors. Andrew, it's great to have you here. I'll let you take it away with our first question for Director Beagle.
Thank you, Anastasia, and thank you, Director, for being here. You know, I think our relationship goes back over a decade now, and you have a really interesting background, and I was hoping maybe you could tell us a little bit about your path to public service and how it led you into the housing space.
Sure. In terms of public service, I used to watch my dad volunteer in our community growing up. And when you fast forward, my first stop in my professional career was as a banker. And, you know, banks want their folks out in the community. So I had an opportunity to take a position on a local board that the bank held and enjoyed getting out into my new community. I just moved there. And it was fun to get to know people. It was a good way to get to know people and to influence some things going on in my community. When I left the workforce to become a stay-at-home dad, I ramped up my community service in order to just get a break from raising the children. Is one reason to get out, and the other was to keep the resume fresh. So when I re-entered the workforce, I could talk about related experiences. And some of my volunteering and community service was with the church. Others, most of it was on city boards and commissions and things like that. And I wound up getting appointed to our local city council when somebody moved out of town. And so my introduction to policy and kind of public service that way kind of came through community service and not so much politics. You know, the city council didn't have, you didn't run with your political affiliation there or anything like that. I didn't know my fellow members, what parties they were from and stuff like that. It was just kind of an amped up community service role. And at the end of my second term, I was recruited to run for the Ohio Senate. And that, of course, catapulted me into the middle of public policy, which I found to be, a rewarding and at times frustrating experience. While I was home with the kids, I also started buying apartments. So in 2002, I bought a 5-unit building with some partners who I've since bought out. But today I own 133 apartments in Miami County. We take Section 8 housing. And so I've got tethers to the real estate world and to the rental world that way. And as a state senator, I worked on new market tax credits, which is an economic development tax credit, but educated me on how tax credits work. And so now in my new role, we do a lot with the low-income housing tax credits, which we'll talk about. So that became very relevant as I take on this new role about, monetizing those and turning those into capital that you can plow into a project. So that is kind of how the twisted strands of a background have kind of come together, and hopefully to the benefit of homeowners across Ohio.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. It's really interesting to see how leaders like you get into this work and public service, especially with the different experiences you've had in local government and state government. And we're really happy you landed at OHFA. And for those listeners who may not be familiar, can you kind of give us an overview of what OHFA does and what the agency is responsible for?
So OHFA is the Ohio Housing Finance Agency. And the key term, well, there's a lot of, all those terms are key, but, we provide financing in order to develop low to moderate income housing, both rental and for homeowners. And we also provide dollars for rehabilitation of units. So our goal is to create as much low income housing and moderate income housing and workforce housing as we can. And it involves new construction as well as rehabbing units, because you don't want units that were available to low and moderate income people to become, what we call market rate housing. So we do those types of programs. All states are going to have an agency that does what we do. Many are called housing finance agencies, but some have different names. But the federal government allocates the low income housing tax credits to all the states based on their population. And OHFA is the agency then that allocates those out to various projects across the state is one of our primary goals. So again, a lot of it's in the financing space, but we also have programs for single families development, for homeowners and first-time home buyers. So we touch a number of things around the homeownership space. We work with your membership around those types of things with our discounted mortgage rates, with our down payment assistance, is how we kind of intersect with the realtors in particular. And we also offer, training for folks like you and your members around fair housing and some other areas that we have. We have marketing materials available that your membership could provide to their clients. So we touch a number of bases that is relevant to the realtors.
Yeah, that's super helpful. It sounds like you guys are doing so much behind the scenes to support housing access in Ohio. And speaking of access, a lot of first-time home buyers, especially, are struggling with affordability right now. I know you mentioned a couple of the programs, but can you dive a little bit deeper into that and share how OHFA helps first-time buyers get into a home?
Sure. Well, we all know, and your membership more than most would know that the rate at which housing prices are going up, and for that matter, rental prices are going up. So we have a couple of programs that are going to help first-time home buyers and homeowners in general. One thing that we are is we can issue bonds, and we issue tax-free bonds. So we pay a lower interest rate on our bonds than other people, and we in turn can pass that savings on to our mortgage borrowers. So we can offer, mortgage rates that can sometimes be cheaper than some other market sources. And so for those of you who may be in the market for a mortgage, or for all of these working with clients, I encourage you to check out OHFA's mortgage rates, because you may find them beneficial compared to some of your competitors, and you can get more house for the money, right? When you have a lower interest rate, when you're dealing with such a large purchase over such a long period of time, every point on that rate matters. We also offer down payment assistance programs. Now those have an income test and are meant for low to moderate income people. But we have a program that offers a 5% down payment assistance, which is very, very popular. Our mortgage volumes are at record levels. Our down payment assistance is at record levels because it appears with the higher housing costs that the ability to come up with the down payment is one of the biggest barriers. So down payment assistance is of particular importance to folks. So I encourage you to have your members look into that on behalf of their clients. We also have programs for called Ohio Heroes, which are for veterans and active duty and military members. We also have programs for first responders, physicians, nurses, and a number of ways that people can get discounts that might get them into homeownership a little easier, including teachers, actually. So we also offer homebuyer education programs. So for those folks who want to understand their mortgage better and the all that's involved with homeownership, it is a complicated acquisition, I guess. We just helped our son with his wife get their first home, and an engineer and a doctor, so not a financial education. And there's lots of questions about the terms and the process, and we'd like to be able to make sure that all first-time home buyers are armed and understand what they're signing. And so we offer some homebuyer education courses as well. So there are some price limits. So I encourage you to check out the programs, because there are some limitations. But we have a lot to offer beyond. We're mostly known for multifamily, low-income housing tax credit work, but we do a lot on the single-family side and a lot for homeowners as well.
Well, and Director, you're right. There's just so many resources that OHFA provides that I think go sometimes untapped, and we need to better utilize them. And it's just some great services that you all provide. I'm going to go away from OHFA a little bit. You spent some time at the state treasurer's office, and during that time, we were able to work together on creating the Ohio Homebuyer Plus Program. And I would give you and your team credit at the treasurer's office at that time. You helped get that through to the finish line, or through the finish line, I should say. Can you talk about that program a little bit and what your role was in that program, even though it's not operated by OHFA?
Always happy to talk about myself, Andrew, regardless of where my topic was. So the Homebuyer Plus program was born kind of out of the treasurer's desire to do something in the housing space. So as a statewide elected official, it was our job to keep him on the road as much as we can and out of the office, talking to Ohioans and being, and this is true with all statewide elected officials. They're moving around the state, talking to voters, and voters aren't necessarily overly concerned about, this person's role. So if they get a statewide elected official from Columbus in town, they're going to talk to him or her about whatever. It doesn't matter if they're the auditor or the attorney general or the treasurer. So the treasurer was hearing a lot about housing and came back to us as the policy staff and said, this is all I'm hearing about, or this is a lot of what I'm hearing about. And how can we, within the parameters of our office, what are some things that we can do? And at the same time, we managed to have a conversation with the governor's office, who was looking at the same problem from a different perspective. And they had their eyes on a different program that the treasurer's office had and wondered about applying it to home ownership. And for a variety of reasons, that wasn't a great fit. But we'd begun conversations about working together on a program. And so they were able to bring to us tax deductions and the benefit of tax deductions. And what we were able to bring is something called our link deposit program, where, and I'll try to be as simple as I can, a link deposit program is where the state supports typically a borrower, like a farmer who wants to buy a $500,000 piece of equipment. We have a program where the state will put a $500,000 on deposit at the bank at a lower rate of interest. So the state gives up some of its interest. The bank, in turn, will take that $500,000 loan to the farmer and reduce his or her rate that they're paying on their loan. So they can get up to a 3% discount on their loan that they're paying, which is a lot of money on a $500,000 loan. And what we did is kind of took that model and turned it around a little bit, because in this case, we're not borrowing money, we're saving money. So the same principle applies where somebody will open up an account, we will put money on deposit at that bank at a lower rate of interest than we would normally get. Instead of charging them less for a loan, they're actually adding more to the interest this person is earning on their savings account. So they get a much higher rate of interest than they would normally, and can save towards that down payment goal just that much quicker. So that is how the Homebuyer Plus program works. And it was conceived mostly, as I said, from the treasurer's bringing us a problem that he heard about. And it has been wildly successful and is quite a popular program. So they are off to the races with it. And it was a fun project to work with our friends at the tax department and coming up with something in conjunction with the governor's office. It worked out very, very well.
This episode of The Real View is brought to you by the Ohio Association of Community Colleges. Ohio's network of community colleges provides accessible training that accommodates the busy lifestyles of aspiring real estate professionals at half the price of a traditional university. With convenient locations in every part of the state, as well as online options, Ohio's community colleges are your smart choice for pre-licensing education. For more details or to start the journey to a real estate career, visit the education page at ohiorealtors.org and then click on the pre-license course locations.
Yeah, this is such a great tool. We know it can be so difficult to actually save up for the purchase of a home, especially for first-time buyers. And we're so excited that so many people have already taken advantage of this program since it launched last year. I think at this point, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, we're over 20,000 accounts opened, which is fantastic. And we're so excited to see folks in the future using money saved up through these accounts to actually go ahead and buy homes.
I mean, it's fun because you create these programs and you have literally no idea if anyone's going to open a single account. And so to hear 20,000 is pretty amazing. That's a rapid growth. It's rapid growth. So that's very exciting to hear.
Yeah, we promote it as much as we can because we want as many people using this as possible. But shifting gears, there's been a growing concern about the housing shortage in Ohio. I'm sure that's no secret to you. Can you share a little bit about OHFA's housing needs assessment? What is it, and what has it found regarding the housing market and kind of the outlook for the future?
We do a housing needs assessment every couple of years. The last one was done for 24 and 25. We are in the process of compiling a new one for 26 and 27. And that is not completed yet. So that is not available for public consumption. But in looking at the 24, 25, it's I don't, these are going to be themes that are familiar to your listeners about, home prices continue to rise. The number of home sales, and according to our data, was going down since the pandemic. And vacancy rates are going down, rents are going up. And in one of the odd statistics is about for those who are in their homes, the percent of their income they're spending on their homes is declining, maybe because their rates are low, the value of their home has gone up. But the number of people who are severely mortgage burdened, who are spending too large to a much higher percentage of their income on a house is actually rising. So you've got a number of troubling trends there, which probably aren't news to your listeners. And I don't know that the next housing needs assessment is going to show dramatic trends. I will tip our hand a little bit to see that there's been a closing of the gap in terms of African-American home ownership. Not entirely sure why or how that gap is closing a little bit. It's still substantial. So we're not where we need to be, but there are some positive trends coming. And so there's a lot of work left to be done. And in terms of what we're doing at the Housing Finance Agency is, trying to balance, a lot of variables. How do we put the most, we have a number of goals that tug us in different directions. We have a lot of different stakeholders. And so, how much do we devote to rural development where we aren't going to get as many units for the same dollars as we are in Columbus, for example? And, how do you balance where to devote these dollars and how much towards single family, how much towards multifamily? So we're continuing to work with stakeholders. We have all of our decisions are run through our board, which is 11 folks who are appointed by the governor's office. We're going to have 4 legislators joining us sometime here soon in a non-voting capacity. So the General Assembly will be able to weigh in a manner of speaking on some of these goals. But we're going to continue to utilize the federal resources that we've been given. And now with the state has a low-income housing tax credit, the Ohio low-income housing tax credit that's vital to us. We call it OLITEC or the Ohio LITEC. So now the state has skin in the game and has made a commitment to creating more affordable housing. So we continue to work to see about, making sure that those dollars are spent on high quality projects in the right areas that are, meeting the needs of that particular area in terms of what percent of low income housing people are in there and workforce housing. So, we don't solicit applications necessarily. So the market kind of responds to our scoring. We can't make Northeast Ohio or Northwest Ohio submit applications and things like that. So, we kind of have to rely on the market to produce applications, and we score them and then allocate these credits to try and get that housing up as soon as we can and get these units rehabbed as soon as we can to try and close that gap. But it is a big problem. It continues to be a big problem. The next housing need assessment will show that there's still a severe shortage of housing and there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And I mean, it's easy for us to throw around terms like housing shortage, but having actual data from things like the housing needs assessment really helps us paint a clearer picture of the problem and help figure out, like you said, what areas in Ohio even need the most attention and where do we need to focus our efforts. So that's really great. But one final question for you, as you look at 2025 and beyond, what are your top priorities for OHFA?
Well, we have our mission is to open the doors to an affordable place to call home. And we want everyone to have a safe, decent, and affordable place to call home. So, So how are we making that happen in the future? We're going to continue to encourage, I think, a building of a variety of housing, which may be of interest to your membership. It is, having been on my local planning board as one of my stops and on a local city council, it's an interesting dynamic to think about, the local elected officials' perspective on that farmland, that 300 acres that's getting developed. And they have one chance to do it right because that housing is going to be there forever. And the locals may think they want something. They want $1 million homes. They want certain things to bring certain incomes in. And so they've got a set of objectives, which data would suggest, well, we have needs across the spectrum. We have needs for senior housing. We have needs for starter homes. And we certainly have need for workforce housing at certain price points. And so there's conflict sometimes between what local jurisdictions want and what we as a state need, and trying to navigate that, which isn't going to be easy, and your membership is going to be an important part of those conversations, are going to be a key thing that we're going to continue to work with in the future. So we want to, we would love to make the Ohio low-income housing tax credit a permanent program. Right now it's set up for 4 years. It's $100 million a year each for the next 4 years. The first 2 years have been totally subscribed. So we could, if the state were to give us more money, we could deploy those and build more units somewhere of some kind. And it's got a 4-year life. So we'd love to see that extended so that program can continue, and the development community can continue to provide a variety of housing, because the developers often want to put up, they do want to put up apartments to fit a need. They do want to make sure that these apartments are close to the grocery store, the drugstore, and on a bus line, and are taking care of our citizens that way. We would love to continue to make use of the single family tax credit, which is another new tax credit. It's been a little slow to take off. We are working on some ways to make this more exciting to investors, which will then in turn drive more single family homes being built. So the state has a number of innovative programs, and we would love to see those continue. So that's going to be an important part of our advocacy in the future, is to see that we can keep using the tools we've got. We also are looking to Washington. A lot of the dollars flowing through my agency are federal, and my March Madness bracket will tell you my crystal ball is poor, and so I don't really know what's going to come of some of these federal funds, but it does give us pause as to how quickly we deploy funds, if they might get clawed back and things like that. So we have to watch Washington as an association. We were down there just 3 weeks ago, talking to the Ohio delegation on Capitol Hill, reiterating those priorities that we have to kind of help Ohioans, get into these homes, stay into these homes, and help us build more of these homes. And we also have new legislation out of the Ohio Senate, has Senate Bill 145 from Chairwoman Reynolds and Ranking Member Craig, which I think attempt to address some of the issues that were uncovered, or at least identified perhaps in the previous General Assembly, as that committee went around the state to identify the multiple roadblocks in developing housing at the local level. So there's some solutions sitting there. We don't know what the future holds for that, but I'm optimistic that housing remains a priority among the General Assembly and certainly of the governor's office. And so we have the support of the state government, I think, to address these problems, and with help of your membership talking to elected officials and citizens talking to elected officials, this will still remain on the front burner for our legislators, and that's going to help when we need things. They'll answer the call. So that is a rather long answer, but significant problems and issues that we have to look at. We've got strategies and plans, and we're going to try and execute on them.
Yeah, it sounds like you have so much coming down the pipeline. And like you said, it's an all hands on deck approach. You got to get the federal government, you got to get the legislature, stakeholders like us. We're always advocating for homeownership and investing in our communities. So thank you for all of your work on that. And we're really excited to hear all of this and to work with you in your new role at OHFA. But I want to thank you, Director, for joining us today on this episode. It's been really great to chat with you and learn more about the work that you do at OHFA and what OHFA is doing to expand access to homeownership and tackle housing challenges. And we really appreciate your time and insights. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and happy to chat again when the need arises.
Thanks. And thanks, Andrew, for being here as well. Always a pleasure. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to The Real View. That wraps up today's episode. You can keep up with the latest on the podcast at ohiorealtors.org/therealview and on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Have questions, comments, or suggestions? We want to hear from you. Email us at podcast@ohiorealtors.org. We'll see you next time.